So I want to contrast what the corporate media has been doing for the last 2.5 years instead of following up on a humanitarian disaster and, frankly, one of the biggest environmental cover-ups in the United Corporations of America's history. Let me show you a clip from The View today.
Then what's the problem? Because this is my question here, and we had a little bit of a break. So he's the worst president in history. There's according to our legal analyst, there's so much in this report that is damning and whatever.
Absolutely.
So what's the problem? Then why is everyone so nervous about 2020? If this is just a nail in the coffin
Because
and
we're afraid the Russians will steal the election again.
But to me, that sounds irrational. That's an irrational answer to this question I just presented in front of you. Democrats, as my friend.
What's the rational answer?
The rational is the same thing I said the same thing I said when I left is that unfortunately for Democrats, you got to get out there and win over the voters you lost in the middle of the country.
The question is, what are Republicans going to do
Thank you for
about
clapping,
this
whoever
behavior?
that is. By the way, my one fan, ma'am, thank you so much.
What is the Republican Party?
3 over there.
I think the better question, Megan.
But the Russians, so the Russians don't steal the election again. The intellectual stupidity of the media elites of this country is astounding. Astounding. But I wanted to play that clip for a reason. Don't get me wrong. I read most of the Mueller report. I disagree with some. I think it is pretty damning. Not in terms of collusion. There was never any evidence that he colluded. It was a fakakta, cockamamie, Cold War, Rocky IV reenactment for ratings and clicks. That's all it was. But Trump did obstruct justice 7 ways to Sunday. Some people don't like that I report that or I say that. Well, it's just true. If you read it, it's true. He did obstruct justice. If he wasn't the president, he'd be charged with obstruction of justice. Most lawyers have said this, and I've read it, and I know about obstruction of justice well enough to know that's what he did. But it's also like, none of it is surprising. We knew who this man was. But why I wanted to play that clip is this kind of talk, this kind of empty, ridiculous, insane, tone-deaf hysteria, so that the Russians don't steal the election again. This is what we have seen for 2.5 years now, since since Donald Trump rolled down that escalator. This is what we have seen from the mainstream media. RussiaGate, Cold War hysteria, fact-free, reporting, sensationalism, propaganda, unverified reports like the Steele dossier being published in full. This is what we've seen. We found this strange thing where they would go in to one home in particular. This young couple just moved in, like in May, and they put, I think it was a test for chlorine, like that little dipstick in, ran the water for 10 minutes, then told them, you're fine. Yet the 1-year-old black baby has white sores all over her leg since moving in 2 months ago.
Yeah, they said feed this water to your babies.
Yeah, the mother has sickle cell anemia and had it all her life, but it's gotten to the point now where she's going to the hospital every 4 days and her levels are off. The husband has seizures prior to the water switch, but it seems to be getting worse. And the 5-year-old son, since moving into this home, who knows whether it's lead poisoning from years ago that's finally showing up, but can't count to 30 anymore, stops at 14, he forgets.
Oh, wow.
Forgetting letters of the alphabet.
The stuff right here was all over her face. Her ears even had tore up. And the inside real bad on both sides.
Yeah, it looks like a mix of blisters and...
And she actually was peeling nails, so...
I will stay on it. I'm sorry this is happening to you.
I'm just I don't know what to do. I'm devastated. I really just want to go to the city and just go off. I cry every day because my baby's skin break out. And I feel like that's just not right. They shouldn't have to go through this. These babies don't deserve that. And then y'all stop the water giving out. Why? That wasn't even a smart situation to do. But hey, y'all think it's good? More power to y'all. Because it's infecting every kid around here. My son went from knowing everything to just having to repeat himself several times to understand what I'm saying. And it's frustrating when you know you sit and you work hard with your kids and they forget stuff.
Stories like Jasmine are everywhere in Flint. You just have to knock on doors and look. Let me explain. What we found in Flint by knocking on 450 doors, because Jen deserves a lot of credit too, she helped me break this story. We found that Michigan Department of Environmental Quality officials went into residents' homes that were on the official state testing program, the state lead and copper testing program. You know, after the water crisis became a national scandal, they created this program to test residents' water routinely and to see if the lead levels were going down. So we found that Michigan Department of Environmental Quality officials in many cases went into residents' homes and ran their water first before taking a sample. Like I described, that's illegal. It's against the EPA's main drinking water regulation, the lead and copper rule. In some cases, it wasn't Michigan Department of Environmental Quality officials who did it. It was workers from the CORE program. CORE were long-term unemployed Flint residents trained by the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality to go around Flint, pass around water filters for residents, help residents put on the water filters, make sure they have enough bottled water, these kinds of things. They were not supposed to be testing residents' water. Neither was Michigan Department of Environmental Quality officials. The EPA said on the record in our story, the state was supposed to drop off the testing kits for the residents to do the testing. So not only did we find they were illegally flushing residents' water lines, we found that they were testing in the first place when they shouldn't have been. In some cases, it wasn't Michigan. In other cases, we found, so you have on one bucket, Michigan Department of Environmental Quality officials were flushing residents' water lines. In another bucket of homes we found, CORE workers were improperly running the water before taking samples. Again, CORE workers were trained by Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. Frankly, they weren't water experts. They're not professionals. They were volunteers trained by MDEQ. So I don't even blame them. They were probably told by Michigan Department of Environmental Quality officials, let the water run first and then take the sample. So they were kind of like useful idiots for the state environmental agency who was running this manipulative testing operation. And in other cases, it wasn't MDEQ or CORE officials actually going in and letting the water run before taking resident samples for them. It was the residents doing it because MDEQ officials or CORE officials verbally told them, let your water run for a little bit before taking the sample. So it was either doing it themselves, officials were doing it for the residents and testing the wrong way, or telling them to test the wrong way. Either way you slice it, it's dishonest, it's deceptive, it's false and manipulative testing, it's artificially lowering the levels, because as a plumber on the record told me in our piece, there's a lot of lead that's inside the home, the interior plumbing, inside the fixtures in the home, including the faucets. So even flushing for 30 seconds, you could potentially be flushing out extremely high levels of lead. Yeah, and it will show up low on the test, but that lead just builds back up. So it's offering residents a false sense of security because it's not actually showing the real lead that's in that home. So in the clip I showed you, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty positive it wasn't actually a lead and copper test that she was describing. There were tests done that weren't official EPA regulatory tests, but there were tests done throughout Flint through this to make sure people's chlorine levels were high. Chlorine levels were adequate for their home because they were adding chlorine to the water. They were adding chlorine to the water system. So in that case, you do flush the water before. You could flush the water as much as 10 minutes, and that's how you do the test. So that's what she was talking about, the little dipstick they put in her water. Yet, these officials, whomever they were, I don't know which officials went into her home. They run the water for 10 minutes. They tell her on the spot, yeah, you're good. It's drinkable. Your kids could drink this. You could bathe them, whatever. They moved in, Jasmine and her boyfriend with her 2 kids. They moved in to that home on Wolcott Street in May of 2018. I interviewed them in June. So they were only in that home for a month. Well, they were told that the water's fine. They did the chlorine test. They were told the water's fine. Well, in that clip, you see the white blisters on her 1-year-old daughter's ears. If you watch the full documentary and other clips, you'll see the white blisters on her legs, and her arms. Jasmine was bathing her for 30 minutes in the bath. Why? Because she was told the water was fine. And you'll see in the documentary, it's drinkable. You could bathe them. You could bathe your children. 1 month into living in that home. Her daughter had clear skin before that. White blisters and scabs all over her earlobes, her legs, and her arms. I don't think she got that from sitting watching, Barney. This is what the state of Michigan is doing. Either gross corruption, intentionally testing the wrong way, or gross negligence and ignorance, telling people your water's fine when it's clearly not. And by the way, it's not just lead that has been the issue in Flint. There's bacterial problems in the water. They found TTHMs in the water, which are cancer-causing chemicals, and God knows what else has been found in that water. They're not testing for all contaminants. Most of the time, they're just testing for lead and copper. So how is it that a young couple like Jasmine and her boyfriend move in with 2 children in 2018? We're not talking about 2016, when the height of this scandal made national headlines. We're talking about 1 year ago, 2018. How is it that a family moves in to this street, officials come over, they put a dipstick for chlorine in their sink, 10 minutes of flushing, which in this case is allowed, they say your water's fine. All of a sudden, her kid's breaking out in white blisters all over her body. Not to mention her 5-year-old boy. When I spoke with him on the porch, I asked him, because I wanted to see, Jasmine said he's having learning problems now and delays. Counts to 14. She says he used to know all the way up to 30. Stops at like F in the alphabet, used to know the whole thing. To be fair, they did live in Flint before this house. So, that could be lead poisoning from 2 years prior at the previous location that's now showing up in his cognitive delays. But there's learning disabilities developing throughout Flint in children. There's behavioral problems causing rampant suspensions in schools and things like that happening throughout Flint. All of this happening in plain daylight, and the media covers it up instead of covering it. And I'm even talking about the Flint Journal, Flint's hometown paper. Do you know the Flint Journal has still not covered our story, and they're probably not going to cover our documentary. This is the Flint newspaper. They have a lot more resources than we do, I'll promise you that. They're not knocking on doors. They're not speaking to residents. They breathlessly, and I'm talking about one reporter in particular, his name's Ron Fonger, have breathlessly, since the water crisis broke out, just republished what Governor Rick Snyder has said, what the EPA has said, and what the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality has said. Same goes for Detroit Free Press. Same goes for Detroit News. So who's supposed to advocate for these residents? Who's supposed to hold the government accountable, actually investigate, are the numbers they're giving us, are these lead levels that they're saying accurate? Who's supposed to be doing this? Because the national media is not, and the local media is not. And for members and patrons who have already watched the documentary, you saw more clips with that young mother, and more horrible clips of her 1-year-old baby, now 2 years old, with white spots and blisters all over her legs and arms. Who knows what's going on in her mind? She's only 1 year old. Who knows what's going on in her mind from drinking that water? Jasmine said, instead of saying mama, she's now saying vava. And misremembering words she used to know. This is why status quo exists, because the corporate media is not going to do it. And frankly, do you see any independent media outlets rolling up their sleeves and knocking on doors? Make no mistake, we didn't just publish the story and be like, oh, we hope it gets traction. We have been working day and night to get this more attention. We met with the Attorney General's office of Michigan in February, and hopefully we're going to meet with them for a second time this week. We met with one of the highest ranking officials in the state of Michigan. They asked to meet with us after we sent our report and evidence. You think they would be meeting with us if we didn't have firm evidence of what we're reporting? Frankly, the congressman for Flint, his name's Dan Kildee, has been silent on this. And frankly, spineless. Frankly, the mayor of Flint, Karen Weaver, has essentially been silent on this and spineless. I don't know why. I have my theories, but I don't want to say those theories until I have more facts. But you're talking about a massive environmental cover-up. You're talking about cooking and falsifying water testing in Flint for over 2 years. And taking this falsified testing, these falsified numbers, and using it to declare mission accomplished. And when you declare mission accomplished, in Flint's case, the water's restored, the water levels are meeting EPA regulations, then shutting down the water pods, which these people desperately need. These people are poor, they're impoverished, they're sick, they're elderly, they're sick and young, they're sick and middle-aged from the lead, from the bacteria, from other things. You're talking about cooking up numbers and then cooking up a false declaration that the water is safe. That is inhumane, that is illegal, it is corrupt, and people need to be held accountable. And as long as I got air going in these lungs, I will keep kicking it. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statusquo.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statusquo.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.